Hi guys, there was some major Brexiteer butthurt on display over the last number of days as the US President Joe Biden visited the island of Ireland. Now, he has received much flack over the brief stay in Northern Ireland compared to the pomp and ceremony bestowed upon him in Dublin. The reason for this is that the likes of the DUP and to a lesser extent the British government didn't want a state-like visit in Northern Ireland. Sunak himself didn't even bother to turn up for Biden's speech in Belfast. But in the GB press, this is being presented as a snub by the US president, and Brexiteers, of course, are angry.
Even though they always try very hard to give the impression of being neutral in anything to do with the Irish peace process, the reality is there's often a lean towards the Republican side for American presidents. As you probably observed, he spent 18 hours, I think, in Northern Ireland, of which around 10 he was asleep. So there's not a great deal of time spent in Northern Ireland, but he's really luxuriating in his time in Ireland. He's going to...
Okay, well, as I said at the beginning, this is because the UK government didn't want a state-like visit of the US president. And the likes of the DUP really didn't actually want Joe Biden there in the first place, because they saw Joe Biden as a negative influence. They knew that he would put pressure on the likes of the DUP, or attempt to put pressure on them, to rejoin the executive. So this is why the UK government didn't want, a lot of pomp and ceremony when Joe Biden was there. They were in charge of, along with the US government, were in charge of the itinerary. So you can't put all this blame on Joe Biden.
His ancestral homes, he seems to really be enjoying himself, actually. He's really making a connection there. And so even though they're trying to be fair, and I think in his defense, there haven't been any huge gaffes over the course of this visit, there is often that slight lean towards the romance of Ireland. So, yeah, this is a partly domestic politics, and unsurprisingly, there's a bit of a lean towards the Republican side of the Irish question, in part also because for Democrats in America, they view Brexit Britain as slightly suspect. There's a very simplistic view of that whole issue over from the American side. And so, yeah, they have, for the last few years, been quite clear that they didn't like Brexit. They were pretty overtly on the kind of Irish side of negotiations around Brexit, and that has definitely coloured the whole sense of it.
Okay, there was no Irish side of the negotiations. The negotiations over Brexit were between the United Kingdom and the EU. Of course, Ireland had an input because, where was the bloody border going to go? But this idea that it's a negotiation between Ireland and the UK, no, it was between the EU and the UK. Now, the points that he raised here about the US looking at Brexit Britain in a sort of sinister way or in a very negative light, why do you think that's the case? Well, I think there are two reasons for this. One is it creates instability. And the US looked at the UK as an ally in Europe, and they didn't want instability. There are businesses, US businesses in the UK. This creates instability for them. The US is there to protect its interests. Brexit created, once again, instability, and they were against that. They don't want their allies unstable. And, there's the idea of the Russian influence as well, creating extra instability. But I think a bigger point probably is, and I mentioned this before, is the bridge to Europe, is this so-called special relationship. The idea that, American influence in Europe is stronger if the UK is part of that group, part of that bloc. That's gone now. And I think people like Joe Biden and Barack Obama understood that British influence in Europe would be diminished. That's why they were against Brexit. For Joe Biden, it's maybe more about the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Good Friday Agreement. Irish Americans were very concerned about Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol when it came to maintaining the Good Friday Agreement. So they saw Brexit as a negative influence. They saw Brexit as a problem. That's why they were against it. But there are a whole range of reasons, and I think instability being the main one. The relationship is over in a sense. Brexit has created this problem. But back to the Brexiteers, they believe that they can restore the empire. They believe that they can make Britain great again. And, you know, on the world stage, the three main powers at the moment are the United States, China, and the EU. And you have to be part of one of those. The UK can't be part of China, and it can't be part of the United States. So if it wants influence like it had before, it needs to rejoin the EU. And that's what Brexiteers want to avoid. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.